Alright guys, welcome back. This is the glue up video where we're going to start to glue up our walls. I've got everything laid out. Everything's been dry fitted together, which means without glue we have fit everything to make sure that it's all cut correctly. It's been sanded accordingly if it needed to be adjusted a little bit, and it's ready for glue up. I'm going to show you a couple different methods for gluing this up today. Some of you guys may have some other supplies available to you that I didn't necessarily provide that will allow you to do this a little bit easier. But you can do it with the things that I've given you as well. So first of all, you may want to find and make sure you have your clamps available to you. I've got a couple of clamps that were provided with each kit. Those are going to be needed today. We're going to need to have some rubber bands possibly. You don't necessarily have to have these, but I find it to be an easy way to do this. You definitely need to have your glue. We can't glue up without that. You're going to need to have a paper towel, and I just got this wet in the sink and I wring it out. It's not dripping at all, but it's definitely moist. So you're going to need that. And I'm not setting it down on the paper because I don't want to get the paper wet. But here I will put it on this block of wood right there. That's going to be used to clean up the glue. I recommend finding a couple of these popsicle sticks. We're going to use this for one of the methods. If you have some things that are heavy that you could use as weights, like I have my Mr. Swingline stapler, we're going to use this as a weight. I have the glue bottle here itself, maybe maybe considered to be a little bit heavy. You could use, I got my paper or my can't speak, the tape dispenser, and then things like I don't know. You'll have to decide what you have that's weight. Your cell phone might work. Your calculator. Maybe you've got a pad of sticky notes or something like that could work. So I'll show you some different methods here. The first wall we're going to glue up is this left wall. We're going to try this one first, and the way that I'm going to do this is I'm just going to flip down in either direction the two top plates. From there, I'm going to open up my glue bottle. I can then, with this in alignment, I can see where the stud's supposed to be. I know the stud's not in the exact spot. Let's just move it so visually that this works. We're going to put a little dab of glue in each spot. Okay. Let me come back over here. Bring this up. A little more glue right there. Spread it out a little bit. Okay. So the way that I want to do this on the center stud, this is going to be a rubber band job. This is kind of hard to do without shooting yourself either with a rubber band. So this has got to be really careful with this. Over the end like this, you're going to put the rubber band on there, and then we're going to stretch it. I'm going to pinch it in the middle if I can, so that it just barely gets pulled over the end. Okay, so now that the rubber band's on this piece, I can take this part, the glue on it. I'm going to put it underneath here. I'm not touching it to the glue though. I'm going to turn it sideways, and then I'm going to pull it all the way over to the end. Okay, so that's going to hold that nice and tight. Then we need to do the same thing to the other end. So I'm going to need to get this. You got to make sure this rubber band is big enough to do this too. I'm really pushing the limits of this rubber band here. Hopefully it stays and it will work. Okay, so now with that rubber band there in place, I should be able to set these other two wall components in place. Okay. Lay that down. And then this whole thing gets a little bit wonky. So this is where I wanted to use a couple of these popsicle sticks. If we take these things, these tongue depressors, and we just put them kind of here in the an inch from the ends, I can then set the whole wall on these sticks and still see all of my lines. Make sure everything's lined up before it dries. And then I can take something with some weight, okay, and I can put it on top to hold everything flat so the wall is not crooked when it's done. I can tell I'm going to need a little more glue in this one here. So I'm going to put some glue in there. Sometimes you got to put the glue right on the end grain. The end grain can soak up the glue like a sponge. You just don't want to have a big drip to the point where your project's going to get glued to your plan. That's definitely not what we're after. So careful of that. Make sure you're doing a good cleanup job. So I can use an extra stick to come in here, just wipe stuff up and, clean everything up. I think I need to bring this popsicle all the way over here. Rubber band is a little bit of a fulcrum point. Okay, so once you get it lined up to where you want it, you can walk away from it, let it dry. So that's that wall. This wall is going to be a little more complicated. We have to do a couple things first. Before we glue this wall together, let me show you how you could have done this wall differently, the little wall, with some clamps. So if you had taken a little bit of glue and you made sure the end grain is covered, okay, the other method you could use is to put this clamp on here, stick this piece right up against it. But you can see I can't tell if it's lined up to my mark or not. So what we have to do is we have to come down until the mark, the pencil line, is right there at the edge. And then we can push this piece of wood, almost got it, tight into the clamping spot there. Try this way. Clamp's fully got to be on the piece of wood. Try to do this where you guys can see it. I have a hard time extending myself over where the camera is as opposed to doing this in my lap. So, all right. So I'm going to do this here. And just to keep this clamp square, we're just going to borrow a little piece of material. This does not actually have any glue on it. It's not going to get any glue on it. It's just to keep the clamp square. And then I can push this other piece in nice and tight to the back here. And that I can see my mark right there for the edge where the stud needs to be is nice and lined up with this piece. So now I could just set this down, okay, to dry. And then when that's dry, I do the next one. So you can see how this is going to take more time to get this whole wall put together than just doing this method here where we use a rubber band. There's another method that a couple of students have decided to come up with that I think is kind of cool too, and that's just using some other weight. So let's do the other student method here real quick, and then I will show you guys that one, and then we can use these clamps for some other pieces in here in just a minute. Again, I'm going to drop these two plates down while this is still wet. We can do this. And I'm going to put a dab of glue on each of these spots. Okay. Then the key here is going to be to take each of these studs and you want to just kind of dab the end grain for a second so that it's wet. Okay. I'm going to just, well, you got full coverage over there. You can see that this spot needs a little bit more. So I might actually want to take them for a little more glue on this one. It's got to be completely covered in glue or this will not work. Okay. So again, I need a little more glue. That's good. That's covered. And then this little end spot. Okay, so this method involves just using a weight to push against both ends of the wall. So right now I'm on the paper, and there's a possibility that the paper could get glued on there. So to try and keep the paper from getting glued, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of tape, and I'm just going to, you can use with saran wrap too, but I'm going to come down this way now. They're all stuck together. This works good with Scotch tape. Oh, my piece was just a little short. It's okay, I can add another one. So then we go right over the Scotch tape where it needs to be. Lining everything up perfectly before we walk away from it, because this is how it's going to dry. Then you can take something that's got some weight to it. Okay. Push that up against that side. And we can take something that's got some weight up against this side. Squeeze the two things together. Make sure everything is nice and flat. Everything's even on the outsides. And then we're just going to let that cure. I see that there is a lot of glue in this little corner here, and I'm afraid of that gluing to the table. So I can take my towel. We're just going to dab in the corner there. Now you can use a pencil or something else. I'm going to try this as well. So let's take a note card here. We'll fold it up. Need more of a sharper corner here. Just scrape that glue off of there. So it's not in that one little spot. Okay. That looks pretty good. So if you just let that sit and dry, then that will successfully give you about an hour and a half at least, and then that will be that wall. In order to get these walls done, the first thing we need to do is glue together the header. We need to make this part. Okay, so in order to do this part, I'm going to take the big piece and we're going to rub these together to get glue completely spread around here. I want good coverage of this. And then what I'm going to do is put a piece of cardboard here. We need to do this again with the cardboard, so the cardboard's got good coverage. Really working it in, pushing it down. I'm going to pull it off and verify the whole thing looks wet, which is good. So at least have one fully covered wet surface. And then you need to line these things up as best you can. We're going to squeeze them real good by hand first to try and get the air out of them. And then I'm going to take my towel, wipe all the squeeze out off, get these things cleaned up. Okay. And we're going to realign these things as best we can. And we're going to take a clamp right in the middle, make sure it doesn't drift. And that needs to be set to dry for about an hour. Okay. And we need to do the same thing with this little guy. So you guys now understand how to do the little one here, so I'm going to leave that one alone. The next thing I want to show you guys how to do is starting to glue these two studs together. So we actually have two sets, right, of jacks and kings, and I can probably fit in one clamp. I can fit both of these, so I can leave no glue in between them. But what I could do is I can glue these up and still use one clamp for both sets at the same time. I'll show you how that works. I'm going to put the glue on the, I feel like my camera is drifting that way. Let's bring you back this way a little bit. I'm going to put the glue on the shorter pieces. Oh, camera over this way a little bit. Okay, so we need to get this guy glued up. And by putting the glue on the shorter piece, I take the two short ones, okay, and I'm going to use them to spread the glue out. Pull them apart. Make sure they both look completely glossy. And put one down on each big one. Okay, so now we've got a jack stud attached to each king stud of the doorway. Now, squeezing those together nice and firmly, I'm going to just wipe off any of the extra glue all the way around before we connect them. Make sure your fingers are clean too, because if your thumb is wet and it's touching the inside, you will end up gluing these pieces together, and we don't want to do that. So then what I can do is I can take these two pieces together. I'm going to put them facing each other, push down on everything towards the table, squeeze it all together here, and then you could use rubber bands to hold this in place, or you can use the big clamp that you have. Okay, obviously the big clamp's not going to be able to do this while it's doing that job, so you have a small one as well. If you need to do them one at a time, you can. I noticed that mine's separating at the bottom, so I'm actually going to take a rubber band and I'm going to do this. You could also use a little piece of tape to help hold this. Actually, let me do that. I'm going to tape this instead. You got painter's tape. Painter's tape works really well at doing this kind of thing. But come around here. Just pull that tape as you come over the edge. Stretch it just a little bit, and it'll help hold everything together while that glue dries. Okay. So then those pieces are going to just be set aside. I'm going to let those dry. So that's just an idea of different ways of doing all this stuff. Some tricks to speed this up by doing a couple at a time. When we take this tape off here, these two different sides will separate because there's no glue in the middle. I'll need to come back and glue up this header here. You can see how to do this one, so you already know how that's going to be done. As far as getting the little pieces glued up with the cripples, I would suggest just kind of getting this piece finished, having it sitting in place, and just setting the little cripples on top with a little dab of glue and just letting them rest there. Or you can clamp these onto the side pieces one at a time by leaving it on its side, gluing all these pieces down, pushing down on it, and then just letting it rest there. You are going to want to make sure you keep this piece though inside it so that you have the proper spacing, and then leave a space for the header, and you can glue that way making this assembly and the other assembly on the right and left side, and then you can glue the whole thing together with the two center pieces, which is the header and this sill plate. Once these are all put together, then we can assemble the wall. The big wall is a little bit trickier. I like to do my big wall either this style over here, where we are, push that back in place, where we are going to put some tape down and just put some weight up against it, or you can try and do some rubber band assembly. But this method here seems to work the best. If you have tape to put it down to save your blueprint so your blueprint doesn't get damaged, I would suggest it, or put some saran wrap down that's nice and tight over the table. That would really help you out a lot. I hope these techniques for gluing up your project have been helpful. When we come back, I'll have my walls all glued up, and we'll show you the next step. Oh, one other last thing before I go. Once this is glued up, you'll notice that the plywood on here does stick out a little bit. It's not perfect, and so you will need to take this before you glue this piece up to the sandpaper with this flat on the table, and you'll need to sand this on all four edges. That way that it's nice and even, and this is ready to go. Okay, you'll have to do that with both headers, the one for the door and the one for the window. All right, I think I covered it all. Let me know if you got any questions.